He's the only man I know of anywhere in the country that's ever gone around not be afraid to say what he thinks and stands up for what's right.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood, that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, in the name of the greatest people, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Gone around not be afraid to say what he thinks and stands up for what's right.
Stands up for what's right.
Now, Alabama has really struggled with an image of being racist, and that's because historically it has been racist. And previously it was a title that a lot of Alabamans liked. Previously known as the Heart of Dixie, seen as one of the last bastions of white rights in the southern USA. Alabama featured quite prominently in the civil rights struggle, and no man better sums that up than George Wallace.
Segregation now.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace, for chiming in and reminding us why you're a shitbag. So, it might surprise some of you that George Wallace's first run at the gubernatorial election, dumb fucking name, was founded on a platform of equal rights for black and white people and a relatively progressive agenda mainly focused on expanding utilities out to the rest of the state.
Nice.
So how did this paragon of virtue, who was seen by most people as being an ally of the civil rights movement and a friend to the people in poverty and someone who wanted to improve everybody's life, turn into the poster child for being a racist asshole? Well, it all started when he lost his election to a racist asshole. So in his first election in 1958, Wallace spoke out against the KKK and was endorsed by the NAACP. And then he was crushed by John Patterson, his opponent who was endorsed by the KKK and spoke out against the NAACP. So George Wallace went away and he doubled down on his progressive... No, he didn't. He went away and he thought, if John Patterson can win by being a racist, then surely I can win by being more racist. And that's what he did. Famously, after the election that he lost to John Patterson, he said, I was out-nitted by John Patterson, and I will never be out-nitted again.
Segregation tomorrow.
And so George Wallace didn't necessarily become a racist, but he did become a populist. He wanted to get everybody on his side, and he wanted to get the most votes. And in a state that had a large majority of racists, that meant being a racist. And so, like flicking a switch, he went from being an ally to progressivism, he went from being an ally to the progressive movement to an enemy of the progressive movement. And he went from speaking out against the KKK for speaking for the KKK. George Wallace gained national attention during the Stand in the Schoolhouse Door. After Brown v. Board, schools across the US started to integrate, and every one of those schools needed, the first black students to come. And when those black students went to the University of Alabama, George Wallace was there to stand bravely in the door and to stop the integration of schools in Alabama for less than a day. And what would become standard procedure for the Kennedy administration, the National Guard came in and told Wallace to get out of the way, which he promptly did. But Wallace got what he wanted. He got his face in the newspaper and he went national. And so everybody knew now, if you wanted a man that was going to conserve these racist segregationist values, George Wallace is your man.
We are proud of George Wallace.
The other notable thing about George Wallace was his support for our old mate, Bull Connor, in Birmingham. Throughout this time and later into his career, he'd also take multiple runs at being the President of the United States.
Segregation forever.
Yep, no, we've got it. Segregation forever. Thank you. All of the racist vitriol would come to a head in the 1970s. During the 1970 gubernatorial election, George Wallace would run what a lot of people said was the most racist political campaign ever run in modern times. And it's hard to disagree. Let's have a look.
What the f*** was that?
It's kind of weird as well, because in one of those cosmic sort of upside down worlds, George Wallace became the racist harnessing people's hate to defeat a progressive who could have won. And my god, did he get racist. 2 years later, while campaigning for president, George Wallace was shot.
A gunshot.
5 bullets hit Wallace, 1 hit his spine, leaving him wheelchair bound for the rest of his life. After racism wasn't working so well, and after he'd been shot and paralyzed, George Wallace claimed that he was a born-again Christian, and shunned everything to do with the racism that had done so well for him in the past. He became a progressive leader. Wallace would go on to win a 4th governor title in Alabama, and during that time, he would appoint more black people to positions in the government than any other governor before him.
Nice.
Now this sounds like it has the makings to be one of those movies where the racist finds out all along that he was wrong and he comes to his senses, but I don't think this was the case with George Wallace. It seems incredibly convenient, not the shooting doesn't seem convenient, but it seems incredibly convenient that he comes to his senses and says racism is wrong right after racism stops being useful to him. And he would claim multiple times that he was not a racist, just a segregationist, which is really splitting hairs here because you have to be racist to segregate a population based on race. If I was cynical, I would say that Wallace never had a revelatory moment, nor do I think that he suddenly became a racist. I think he did whatever suited him at the time and whatever was the most convenient to maintain power. At the beginning of his career as governor, that was being racist, and at the end of it, it was being progressive. I'm surprised he didn't change the way he was facing every time the wind blew. Now, not everything Wallace did was bad. He did encourage a lot of economic development in Alabama, and he did help to set up the state community college system. But this alone does not wash out all of the bad things he ever did. Today's episode is brought to you by Korean seaweed. When your wife tells you you need to lose weight, but you don't want to stop eating, eat Korean seaweed. This was not an official sponsor. Another look at a civil rights villain. I feel like a lot of attention gets put onto the sort of the heroes of the civil rights era, and there's not a lot of attention paid to these people who were on the wrong side of it, but they were still important, because historically it seems like you need an opponent to progress things. And people like Bull Connor and George Wallace, they provide that opposition that shows you why civil rights was so important. Anyway, if you liked the video, please leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, all that stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
And he does what he says he will do, because he's for the little man. And there's more little people than there are big ones.
He's the only man I know of anywhere in the country that's ever gone around not be afraid to say what he thinks and stands up for what's right.
Especially as native Alabamians particularly, we are proud of George Wallace, and we also think he's a very capable man.
Nice.